meeting talked me into giving a talk on corn production. Been doing crop consulting in South Central Louisiana for 35 plus years, and like I told somebody, I think I was 7 years old when I started, so it works out. My area is about 35 miles northwest of here on the other side of the Mississippi River in Point Capee Parish. Dan mentioned that a while ago in his talk. And my work is basically with all the agronomic crops that we grow in that area. What I'm going to do as far as the knowns is quickly run through things that I feel like are mandatory to growing a corn crop, giving it every basic chance to make a good yield. And a lot of these I've learned from my growers through the years. And so I'll run through them pretty fast. And when I say mandatory things, we know this is what we have to do to make a crop, but really we're not completely certain. Like I like to say, I don't know much, but I suspect a lot. I suspect these are all pretty important. In the fall, we plan for our lime and our P&K, et cetera, based on soil test, et cetera. The deep tillage, the rip and hip type tillage operation, so you can break that hard pan and set that row up for the stale bed approach, so that when March comes, all we have to do is get in there, knock down the row if needed, and just go right in and plant. And that has worked for many, many years. Ryegrass is becoming more and more of an issue. So in the fall, fields with a history of ryegrass, we are addressing that more and more in the last couple of years, because this ryegrass is glyphosate resistant. And so we're doing dual or generic dual, either alone or in a tank mix with paraquat. If the dual is going out alone, we're doing that early, like in October. In some cases, we're finding that it's best to wait until the ryegrass flushes, say in that Thanksgiving time frame, and doing a tank mix of dual and paraquat. So we do an early burn down. Those are going out right now on these fields where it's still a little damp, going out with four-wheelers. And this would have been happening even several weeks ago, but it's even been too wet for four-wheelers. So, and if we miss the rain on Sunday, we can get some big machines in the field next week for continuing our burn down operation. But the green bridge has got to be eliminated, because the menagerie of soil insects has got to be dealt with that way. We've got to starve them to death. What we shoot for on time of planting is March 1st to April the 12th. Any earlier than March 1st, we have seen no benefit or advantage to doing that. And a lot of people say for South Louisiana, April 12th is a little bit late. But in a lot of years, we run into wet periods, and if you don't find the first week or two of April acceptable, then in some years you might not have a lot of acres of corn. But we can make great corn, depending on the weather, and I just picked April the 12th. But just getting later than that, you're going to run into heat problems in May and June for that later crop. Corn following corn, we just never do it. We just never do it. We rotate. And I'll say this, maybe it does happen sometime. I can't remember the last time one of my guys planted corn following corn. It must have been some special circumstance, but I can't even remember. We shoot for planting 32 to 35,000 seed. And I should point out on our corn, we feel like it's logical to forecast a yield in the range of 170 to 220 bushels. I know that's a big range, but I'm saying that because to point out that not too many years ago, we would have been saying, okay, well, our corn yields we would forecast to be 130 to 170. I'm just saying that's how much progress we've made, and most of this is dry land. So the genetics and other things have contributed to us to be able to say, yeah, we can make better corn. Going to the higher populations where we used to look at 28,000 to 32,000, the companies and experience in the field has told us, yeah, we can go to those slightly higher populations on our 36-inch rows. We don't have any 30s or 20s or twin rows or anything like that. But we have good standability and good stalk strength. We don't have to be as afraid as we used to of a thick stand lodging later in the season. We always plant at least 2.5 inches deep because if we don't, the birds will pull the seed out of the ground. And even if we had zero bird pressure, there's ample proof that shallow planted corn will be reduced in yield. If there's no other factors except planting depth, we can find you the data to prove shallow planting will cost you bushels. They're just saying. So 2.5 inches deep, if you get the big packing rain that packs the corn in, it was going to get packed in anyway if you planted it shallow. So just get over it and plant it deep. You won't regret it.
The lodging factor in there too.
That too, absolutely, absolutely. 5 gallons of pop-up sprayed in furrow at planting, and that's just, a standard procedure. And because of that high dose, I call it a high dose of phosphate, it's important for early seedling growth, but if you don't do it, you will see a difference. But if you don't add zinc to that, and you're borderline on phosphate, you're going to get a phosphate-induced zinc deficiency on the corn seedling, in my opinion. And on seedling corn, once you've adversely affected that seedling with a zinc deficiency, no matter what you do in terms of zinc remediation after that point, you cannot make up for those lost bushels. Zinc is unforgiving in this respect. So it's a safe thing to do. It'll make you corn. In that mixture, we'll always include bifenthrin in furrow with that because of the cutworm pressure a lot of times, but also we suspect occasionally fire ants will attack the germ of that seed, especially if it lingers there under cool conditions for a while. That's a disputable thing, but I'll go with that. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So, basic seed package usually is what we do because, and we'll talk about that more later, I guess, is the basic seed package, because these premium seed packages is something that just adds dollars to the cost of the operation, and we're unsure about the return on that added investment. So generally speaking, and Dan covered some of this, we would be on light soil aiming for 195 total pounds of nitrogen, not counting what went in with that pop-up. That's on the lighter soil, plus 20 to 24 pounds of sulfur. On the heavy ground, looking at 225 on the heavy soils, and about 20 to 24 sulfur. Mid-season urea, as it works out, we very seldom do that, and we need to continue to try to find a reason or a rationale for doing that. Again, 100 pounds of urea, 46 units of nitrogen, what's that going to cost if we're not sure we're going to get a return? Most of this is dry land corn. You look at the crop at pre-tassel and you say, in all respects, it appears to be well fed with nitrogen. The forecast would say, okay, well, I don't know if I'm going to get a rain to be able to water in this urea or not. So yeah, the Y drops, maybe we need to study that a little bit more and see if there's something there that we can benefit from. And then, of course, for us in the deep south where we don't have very cold winters, southern green stink bug during ear shoot formation, they form aggregation colonies in these cornfields for mating purposes, and while they're doing that and feeding, they will destroy a lot of ears of corn. And if you don't think, you just let them have it sometime. Now, the further north you go, you get winter kill with southern greens. You won't have this problem. We don't have the problem with it that we used to. Why? Because red-banded stink bugs have been so horrible in Louisiana soybeans. Southern greens are getting annihilated in our soybean program, so we're not sending southern greens into overwintering like we used to years ago. So see how it all works together. So we don't have to spray stink bugs in corn as much as we used to, thank goodness. Foliar fungicide, maybe, kind of depends on what southern rust is doing. This has occurred, a couple of times the last few years, and so on the later planted corn that has good potential and the weather conditions are there. Yeah, we're probably going to treat it. We've done some of that the last few years. Aflatoxin is a reality down here this far, and we do Afligard, especially on the heavier soil that's going to be more prone to drought stress. And if you have some need to know more about how to mitigate aflatoxin in your corn, get with these guys in South Central Louisiana on how to minimize this threat by proper harvest procedures. It makes a huge difference, okay? We do not burn corn stubble. We just don't. I mean, we're going to incorporate that organic matter, and we have plenty of time to do it, because all that time between July or early August when we're harvesting all the way till first frost or field prep for wheat, there's a lot of time for managing these weeds and grasses in the fallow. We have a nursery out there, so that topic right there alone could be a whole talk right there. But okay, return on investment. This is where we're moving from the knowns, which would maybe be for you a different set of knowns, to the unknowns, where we guys are getting bombarded with the need to spend on all sorts of things. I just gave up. I didn't even want to try to make a list of all these additional practices, products, and additives. And I'm not going to say snake oils, okay? I'm not, because some of these have some validity. If you have some need for fungicides, by all means. I mean, but and Clayton's going to talk more about some of that in this talk today, or in others that he's giving. But the list is endless. The corn's not $6 a bushel anymore. So what from an unknowns part of this talk is really just a thinly veiled plea to our friends in research to possibly look at a different way to ferret out or to illuminate for us a better way to make decisions on whether we get a return on investment on these extra expenditures or not. And really, Scott started thinking about that a few years ago when let me back up and say that higher population seed costs a lot more money and things like that. But when it comes to extra money, and it's been talked about, somebody commented a while ago, in a 2-year cycle, this is out of Iowa, for example, where, if you're making pretty good corn and beans, this is phosphate removal in a 2-year cycle. So just pick you a yield and a combination here with your beans and your corn, and you're in there, I don't know, let's say at 100 to 120 pounds of phosphate removal every 2-year cycle. Who's putting out that much phosphate in a 2-year cycle? That's just removal. I'm saying that, okay, if we want to spend more money, is this the place we ought to spend it, not on a new planter or what, you know what I'm saying? So just to prove that the list is endless on this type of thing. But when I, a few years ago, heard Dr. Fred Below from Illinois, crop physiologist there, talk about the way they have conducted some studies with various practices in corn production for them up there. And that's a long way from Louisiana. They have great soil, a lot of organic matter. They have more sunlight during the day during corn production, all those things. But there's a place for that in what we do here, because I don't think we've tried hard enough to give it a chance. But when it comes to a grower trying to figure out how to spend his money, I think it's worth the effort. But a way to determine the relative contribution of those expensive additional practices or the penalty for not doing them. That's all. And that's, I think, most fair-sized growers in Louisiana have a very good sixth sense on how to evaluate what returns money to them and what doesn't. But this is one of those things where we just need more information, more data. So if you look at this setup, is where they took, and this is using, 5% level of probability, and I'll mention that again in a minute. But their standard management of a corn production system yielded 169 bushels of corn. This was in 2011, for example. This is just one example. He's got plenty of data. And the high management system, where they influence the yield with these factors, control these factors, 195. All right, so standard, what they did was they took one at a time, fertility, and they placed extra nitrogen, or they placed the nutrients in the row, and they measured the influence. Then they protected the nitrogen, that factor alone, 8 bushels. Genetics, that would be a racehorse hybrid. You see where he's going with this. Then they pushed the population up. Look what happened. fungicide whether they needed it or not at flowering, okay? So that's where you took the standard system and added one at a time, and what these practices contributed to the standard management yield. Then they put all 5 of those factors in place, and then they removed one at a time. You understand? So they said, okay, in the high management system, then we're just going to fertilize according to soil test. See right here? And this is what Belo's work is showing with the genetics these days. They have a soil test that says this field is adequate in phosphate, for example, for growing corn. They put in the phosphate anyway and getting a yield response. That's not supposed to happen, but it does. Genetics are very good. Same thing here with plant population. They took the higher population and backed it down to only 32,000 plants. So that's 13,000 seed to the acre that they saved, and in this case, cost them 1 bushel. That's just an example. Okay. Dr. Belo is I think the only talk I've seen where somebody said, okay, well, do you see a plant health benefit to the fungicide in the absence of disease? And he's the first guy I've ever seen that said, in the presence of these other practices, we're doing something by leaving out the fungicide. What's going on with that? Well, we got these things going on is what we got. So I'm just throwing this out as an idea. In Louisiana, our 5 factors that we want to look at are not going to be these. We're going to pick something else that means something to us. You understand? And so that's why when it comes to unknowns, this is a way to get to that. This is another test, 2015. He used the 0.1 probability. But you can see on this is adding 1 enhanced factor to the standard system. And you can see here pretty substantial influences by adding these other, investing in other ways to do it. But, oh, by the way, high population, not so much, you see. So if you want to look at more and more of their research, again, it's interesting reading. You know, you can't sleep one night. Just Google University of Illinois crop physiology, and it'll bring you to their website. And so the converse of this one on this study was the enhanced system and then removed factors from that high-tech system. Pretty good yield there. So when they just went back to the soil test, that's a lot of bushels. Even in this case, in this year, the lower plant population did cost something. So then we would talk about row spacing. Well, they have the sunlight up there. So, but I was going to, before I close out, I was just going to mention, just for review, is that probability for, research guys getting their articles published, but that's, say a 10% chance that the treatment difference was due to chance alone or due for some factor other than the treatment effect. Is that right, Clayton? So I've been advocating for using a 20% because people in commercial agriculture make decisions every day with odds that are less advantageous than that. So all of those significant differences would have been even more profound.
Or would you go lower?
Yeah.
Would you go, 0.20 or would you go 0.30? What would you?
Pick a number.
No, I mean,
Yeah.
you're happy with 0.20?
Yeah.
You are personally?
I am personally, yeah.
Yeah.
So in Louisiana, and I just made a quick list for corn in an omission study, and if you had to pick 5, you could take some of these things that we do already and say, okay, measure if we decided to leave out the pop-up, what would that matter? We're doing this zinc and furrow. Yes, we think it has an effect. We're not doing headline AMP, but that's what they're using in Illinois a lot of times. So you could say, okay, I'm gonna spend the money for the premium treatment, yes or no. So that's what we could measure our corn on corn penalty in Louisiana, et cetera, et cetera. Do a twin row, but do these factors in the presence of other factors that influence corn yield, not just that variable alone. And that's all I'm advocating. We have, the LCO promoters. I don't know about a lot of that stuff, but A company like Monsanto has apparently seen something going on here that, because they bought the company. I'm just saying, there must be something going on. But anyway, the more data is better. It's an opportunity to get a better handle on return on investment, that's all. And I think as yield potential has increased, these things just get more important because it's more money involved. So if, you start leaving 10 bushels on the table here and there and 15 bushels on the table here and there, it starts adding up to real money after a while, and that's all. So that's my knowns and unknowns. Questions, comments?
What would your 5 be?
My 5
Top
would,
5,
yeah, it would probably be, I'm interested in that one.
Yeah.
A foliar fungicide, from a prophylactic standpoint, we need to either rule out plant health effect in Louisiana or not, you know what I'm saying?
At that point at R1, generally it is prophylactic because,
Correct. Yeah, because I'm actually leaning, since I did this chart, I did this chart probably a year or two ago, actually, would be dry silk. First dry silk is probably what
You
I'd be
must
leaning
not
to.
sleep good at night then.
Yes.
I'm just kidding.
So yeah, like I say, they're coming up with those ideas. I'm not good by myself. I do better talking it over with
Can
people.
you send me that?
Oh, sure, no problem.
Are you okay with 5 gallons of 1034
Yeah.
Salt factor.
Oh yeah. No, we haven't seen a problem with that.
Okay.
We haven't seen a problem.
Really, over 10 pounds of salt in furrow really shouldn't be done. 10 pounds should be cut off. 5 gallons of 1034 is 11.2.
Yep.
And most of the time it's all right because it rains anyway.
We don't put
Turn it
5
off
gallons.
dry, it can go the other.
Most of the time, I'm trying to hold my guys.
Because you got the zinc.
Yeah,
Your total
That's
package
right.
is 5 gallons.
but I know some guys that do 8 and 10 with against my.
Against mine too, they've replanted corn.
And usually we don't see a problem.
Rain,
But
rain covers up a lot of.
part of the thing is that we plant deep enough, and where the position of this nozzle is, we're getting some soil fall back in that furrow just ahead of that nozzle a lot of times. So it's not going directly on the seed. It's close, too close. So.
Anything else?
He didn't tell me the 5.